Hello. Welcome everyone to today's session of the Digital Cultures Festival. It's the sixth day of the festival, and tonight I have the pleasure to invite you to our Cine Club, centered around the film "A Year the Year of the Robot." So, as you know, Digital Cultures Festival, with the team Imagine Futures, is organized by the Adam Mickiewicz Institute in Poland, and the festival will be running till the 25th of October. So today and tonight we have this great opportunity to talk with the director of the film, who is here with us. Hello, Yves Gély.
Hello. Very pleased to be here and to join you on this talk. It's great for me.
And we have also with us Aleksandra Przegalińska, Professor Aleksandra Przegalińska, who is in the studio in Warsaw. Hi, Aleksandra, and who is an AI philosopher.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
And we have also an online audience. So if you would like, dear online audience, to engage in this conversation, please feel free to either comment the video, but also you can go to our website, Digital Cultures PL, find us in the program, and click the Join Zoom button, which will allow you to also be part of the conversation. And tonight is this Cine Club event. So if you would like to ask some questions, you can even raise your hand, and we can also have you live in our digital studio if you'd like. I would like to start this conversation with Yves Gély. And well, I would like very much to, first of all, introduce you not only as the director of the film, but also as a photojournalist that also has been having a career in documentary and contemporary art. And you started then working with major scientific research laboratories dedicated to the development of humanized robots and social robots. And in 2016, you started working on this film, The Year of the Robot, that we'll be presenting tonight. So could you please tell us a few things about the genesis of the project? Just tell us what was the story?
Well, the story started in 2007. I've been doing a long work on the humanoid platform in the main laboratories all over the world. It was a photographic project. So I worked on it for almost 1 year. And following this series, it was quite successful in museum exhibitions, and I start to meet a lot of people around this work, and I realized that finally I was fascinated by these platforms for sure, but I understood that the most important thing was again humans in front of this machine, more than machine itself, because machine itself will develop in laboratories for sure, but the reaction of human beings were more interesting. And on a trip in Afghanistan, I was working on the Salah, on the robot killers, but it was at the beginning with deminers, and I crossed a strange situation where soldiers, deminers, put him in danger to save his robot from a bad situation, and so it came to me that it could be interesting to study this effect, this situation. And when I came back in France, I was in contact with a laboratory which was introducing social robots in health, mostly in institutions treating people suffering from Alzheimer. And so I spent 6 months with this lab studying the way they were working with this small robot, robot. And well, I was fascinated by these situations, but I was more interested to make the one-to-one relation. I was not so much interested by the fact that the people in the lab were putting the robot in front of the patients just to make interaction with the patients, and I was more interested to to catch the strange feeling that the people decide to get themselves a relation with a robot. So that's why it took me 2 years to work on many institutions and working very slowly, step by step, and waiting that these people decide to get a relation with a robot, to talk to the robot. But I was not putting the robot like interfering with people. At the beginning, it was a robot like a statue, like an object, and start to move weeks after weeks, workshop after workshop. And I was waiting that a reaction for the people in front of this robot. And I tried to catch these situations.
Because maybe I will interrupt you here because I think it's a good moment to show the first video and to explain a little bit to those of you who haven't seen the video how is the project conceived. So if you could tell us a bit more, Yves, about what we see now and what is the scene.
That's the beginning of the movie. It's very close about the workshops, the way the robot is used, but it's not exactly the way. You know, usually on the workshop, the lady in charge of workshop, it's side by side with the robot in front of the people, and they noticed that people were doing the movement more easier with a robot. It was helping a lot about the efficiency of this workshop. But the robot was used as how can I say? I don't find the word in English. As help for the leader of the workshop. You know, more than working from itself. You know, like. Simulating a kind of autonomy.
So I think your film very much inverses this narrative that we have about how we imagine the interaction between human and robots. So I think the scene, if you could ask to play now scene number 2, I think this is something which can also give a little bit of insight, more insight into this film.
Just to explain, the song you hear, it's a lady who was singing these 3 notes all the day long, and she was walking on this long corridor, day and night, all the time, never stop, even in the morning, even when she was eating. So this lady, when we met her family, she told us that she was. We just tried to know more about her, and we learned that she was playing piano when she was very young, and she was suffering a lot, very strong Alzheimer, and she was really walking all the day long. It's a long corridor, and she was always singing these 3 notes. And she was going on a workshop of music, but she did not interfere, never. And one day we proposed to the family if we could do something. It means to bring her to a piano and try to make her playing these 3 notes of music. She was singing, and it worked. She started to play these 3 notes, and like you see on the film. And in the same time, we put the robot, and the robot started to dance. And before this lady was ignoring totally the robot. And when the robot started to dance, she understood that there was something, the robot dancing for her, with her on the piano. And and this crazy moment happened. It worked. The relations start to happen. And it's on the movie, it's very short, but on real, it's this situation follow for almost 15 minutes. And and it was kind of, my work, it was like small diamonds, in a coal mine. It was finding some just unbelievable situation, but we could not know if it will happen or not, So it was depending only for these ladies, and they were controlling all the time their relation with the robot. So that was very interesting for us. It was exactly what we tried to catch, this intimacy between the robot and this lady in this piano lesson,
I think this the strength of this film is this intimacy. So basically, for the people who will be watching the film, I think we can say that it's a story of robots in this elderly houses, and basically this is how the whole film. This is like the whole narrative of the film, right? It's like this portrait-like film, right? It's very aesthetic at the same time because you are a photographer. How did you work on this part of the film?
That's quite important because I didn't want to know. I fight a lot with my producer because he wanted me to do a documentary, and I was not interested at all on documentary. I was interested about catching this small moment, like a piece of archives, of the first meeting with a robot and a human, and what could happen. And so for this reason, I put a fixed frame far from the scene. To let the intimacy happen, and there is no montage, no cut in this scene. It's one piece. So I did not interfere. Even the subjective eye of the director was not in. It was like just a camera turning. Like the scientists do sometimes. They put a camera-scope in a corner of the lab, and they catch what's going on, just for archives. And it was this idea. That's the first one. Number two, about the color and about the place. I try to make the things to film in a very empty places. So there was nothing but this relation, and the colors are very pale and a bit blue and not very clear, not very sharp. And for me, it was to make this feeling about that the fact that the ladies could be dreaming about what they were crossing with this robot. It was like a dream, like something not real. And this movie is very ambiguous because it's real in the fact that the human beings are real and their real reaction and their real intention in front of the machine, in front of the robot. But in the same time, the robot, it's more intelligent than it can be. We decide to make an intelligent robot. That's just for one reason. We did not want an impressive robot. We wanted a robot which is very, very, very banal, very, very simple, and it disappears in a way because it's not doing a lot. It's just receiving the words of this lady. So, and he accompanied. That's all, But it's not. He don't do something very strong. He's just there, and that's why it's all the combinations to make this like this one step ahead. And the fact that these places, it's a place where people are at the end of their life. It's like I don't know. It can be dreamed like just one step ahead. I don't know.
It touched me a lot. This relationship between this elderly people, this portrait of elderly people, beautifully shot, who are building a relationship with this childlike robot. And I think we're talking a lot about what the robots are. So, but maybe it would be great to see another piece of the film and just to have a look at the robots and at the way they interact with the patients or inhabitants of these homes. So if we could have the video number 3, please.
Tout me plaît chez toi. Tes yeux, tes bras quand ils bougent, et ton sourire que je devine. Ça en fait des choses. Oh oui, ta tête qui bouge.
Mon sourire.
Oui, beaucoup. Tout me plaît.
Je ne suis pourtant qu'un robot.
Eh ben, je sais pas. Tout est beau. Je crois que je vais t'emmener avec moi partout. Partout, parce que tu vas plaire à tout le monde. Si tu me plais à moi.
Elle a entendu? Balle, football, ping-pong.
Yes, for this lady, she was very, very isolated in her room, and she was quite sad. And she heard about the workshop with the robot in the hospital, so she asked for the robot in her room, and she directly started to talk to him. And I think the robot for her was like a window opening, or something new, something fresh, something different. And the fact that a robot is like a child, a kid, with a nice voice, and is never negative, and is never nervous, and is always on the same feeling, get the same feeling every day, and full of good feeling for the lady. And she was mostly doing a kind of auto-empathy, you know. She was very empathic for herself, you know. She was trying to talk to her, but on a loud voice, you know, open voice. She was like that. For me, it was like a monologue, inside monologue, you know, in front of the robot, and just using the robot. And each time these ladies make some so fantastic dialogues, you know. You see when she said that you smile, and this robot don't smile for sure, and she feels the smile of the robot, so it's like the robot put a smile on her, you know. And well, so it's not my rules to make a kind of psychological analysis, but for me, I was just catching this improbable, this unexpected scene, you know. Each time something like that happened, we were very, very surprised, because in the room there is a computer, there is the people, the camera, the sound, everything. But even with all that, they decide to talk to this machine and to start a dialogue, but a real dialogue. It's not just a play. Somehow it's a play, but it's a play for herself. It's not a play for us. It's really something she's really involved and immersed in this relation. And each time it was the case.
I think also it's very interesting how this robot and how this project, who started as an art project, evolved into a project which is kind of a therapeutical project. And somehow the robots became part of the therapy of these people, right? Yes.
Well, at the beginning, in the first lab I was working on with, I asked them to make this protocol of work, and they refused. They said, no, we are working with a group, and the robot is interfering with a group, and the robots don't. They didn't want any personal relation between the robot and the human beings. They wanted just the robot as helping some workshop, you know, in all the different workshops that they do, you know, for all working for the memory and with the music and the robot singing or the robot helping to make movement, but they didn't want in any case this personal relation, and I was only interested by this personal relation, and I was not interested by the robot in front of people, but the people decided to get a relation with the robot. So that's why I lost your question, but that was the way.
That they become part of the therapy, the robots, and
yes, okay.
And
okay,
I think also the next scene, I think maybe we can play the next scene as well, which is about the birds, which I think also shows very well how this worked, what was the dynamic between the robots and the people. Can we have video number 4, please?
T'as mis tes beaux yeux aujourd'hui.
Pourquoi cette passion pour les oiseaux?
J'ai pas compris.
Pourquoi les oiseaux?
Parce que les oiseaux s'envolent, ils montent vers le ciel, et puis comme ils sont contents, comme le ciel est bleu, alors ils chantent. J'aime les oiseaux parce qu'ils chantent.
Comme les anges?
Non, les singes ne chantent pas, ils crient.
Je parlais des anges, pas des singes.
Comme les anges, oui.
Pas les singes.
Non.
Il y a des oiseaux dans l'hôpital?
En principe, oui, il doit y avoir 1 ou 2 cages avec des oiseaux, parce que les oiseaux, on les fait prisonniers, et puis on les empêche de voler.
Vous connaissez des robots oiseaux?
Je connais quoi? Qu'est-ce que tu viens de
Des
dire?
robots oiseaux?
J'ai pas compris.
Oiseaux.
Oui. Je connais
Des
quoi?
robots oiseaux.
Des bonbons
Comme
oiseaux?
moi, des robots. Des robots oiseaux.
Non, c'est pas des robots, tu sais.
Oh,
Ils ont un papa, une maman, et puis ils apprennent à voler. Ils se mettent sur le bord du nid pour se laisser tomber, puis avec leurs ailes, ils volent. Mais ils volent pas très haut, tu sais. C'est des petits oiseaux, des tout petits. Il y en a des beaux, il y en a qui sont jaunes. Ils sont en or, ils sont jaunes. Puis il y en a qui sont verts. Et ils parlent tout le temps, c'est des perroquets. Ils sont grands. Ils parlent beaucoup, ce sont des perroquets.
j'aimerais voler moi aussi.
Ils essayent d'imiter l'homme, de parler comme nous.
Well, I can't tell you this story because this is just an amazing story. Because this lady, I met this lady in because this hospital was using robots, and but in the way of traditional way. And I met this lady on this workshop, and she seems to be very interested by the robot, but she did not say one word. And during all the workshop, and then she went back in her room. So I asked the nurse why she don't interfere, she don't speak with the robot, and she said, no, she never speaks, she never reacts, she just. But her eyes was just amazing. So I asked the nurse if I could propose the lady to get a conversation with the robot, and the nurse told me no, if you want, yes, but she won't answer. So we went with a in her room, and she did not answer. But she looked at me, and she was bright eyes, and so I said to the nurse, "Okay, let's do this meeting, and we will see what's going on." And the nurse said, "Okay, why not?" But nothing special. So next day, when the wheelchair parked with her in front of the robot was switched off, and she was switched off also. She was very close. She did not say nothing to anybody. And the robot started to stand up, and the eyes lightened, and she said, "You put your beautiful eyes today," and she started to speak like that, and in a just a beautiful way. And behind me, the nurse was half crying, and the psychologist said, "Okay, we must stop this because it's. I don't understand what's going on." But he was very shocked, and finally we succeed to calm down these people, and we follow the scene. And we have a lot of difficulties, even when we did the montage of the film, to put this voice on the background away of the people. Just and when the scenes end, the robots, the batteries were off, and the robots stopped down, closed eyes, and she stopped also, and she said nothing, and she went back in her room, and we were just like this. Just catching this scenery. Well, I mean, it was not daily, it was exceptional, this kind of event. But, well, I don't know. It's something, this robot just open her, I don't know, again, makes her heart beating, and her brain again dreaming about these strange things in front of her. And the funny things, you could imagine that she did not understand the robot, but finally in the dialogue she said, "No, it's not a robot. I know what is robot." She's and on this film it's always this. When the lady said, "You are smiling," or it's always something which show that. Well, these women just control totally the relation with the machine. It's not a machine which make them reacting. It's they decide to get a relation, and that's I think the strong point of the film.
I think it's very interesting indeed in this film, this relationship about this artificial presence, but about real emotions and real interactions, and a certain playfulness in this process, and also this honesty of the people and of these relationships. But also, I really like how fairy tale-like it is. How we don't know what is true, what isn't true. Just the way the patients, I don't know if I shouldn't even be calling them patients, the protagonists don't.
Yes, protagonists. I agree with you. For me, it's not patients. It's beautiful. It's like actresses. They are doing something just amazing. They are so generous about what they give to the camera. It's amazing. It was like.
It's amazing.
It was like yes, it's really amazing, and it's like a dream, and then like. I mean, this movie could be. You can get this movie by many sides. You can make with this movie a very different approach and very different feelings. And so about the therapy, you asked me about the therapy. Finally, my intention. Yes.
Yeah, this could be our last point in this conversation. So just so that we have an outline, because I see some questions coming in from the audience as well. So I think what we can do, we can talk about therapy, because this is a film where we could be talking for hours, honestly. But I think what we can do, we answer the therapy question, and then not to keep the audience waiting, we will go on with the presentation of Alexandra, who will talk from the other perspective. And then just an information for the audience and for all of you who have questions, we will take all the questions at the end together for Yves and for Alexandra. So to go back to the therapeutic question, I asked about therapy. So was this therapy?
The therapy, okay, my intention was definitely not a therapy, but on the three institutions I worked with, when I end my work, well, it was time to leave, and I got my robot, so I had to live with my robot, and I feel at this moment a very, very, very strong feeling about. I feel guilty, to live with this robot after all these dreams coming up, and so I decided to. It was not my role, but I decided to ask the production of the movie to finance one robot by place, and to make possible for the ladies in charge of workshops to study the way they could use a robot. So I don't know what's going on. I know that it's not so easy, because it was a huge work to make this happen. But well, with this COVID now, it's difficult to get access in this place. But I'm sure that the robot is still going on in different way. I don't know. Perhaps it's a different way. But everybody was looking for this robot, and I think this robot it's kind of tools finally in therapy talking. It's a part of it's like in this place they use dogs or cats or things like that, and it's a bit the same, and then the reaction perhaps are different. It's a complementary. It's an objet complémentaire. It's it's a therapy like many therapy. It can be a therapy like many therapy, but
I think we will find out more about how this works and how we humans react to robots from a scientific perspective in this next presentation. So thank you so much, Yves, and we'll get back to you at the end of the conversation. And now
thank you.
We're transporting ourselves to Warsaw, where Professor Aleksandra Przegalińska is. Hello, Aleksandra.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
I'm very happy to have you here for this conversation to give us another perspective on the same subject. And you have a doctorate in humanities in the field of artificial intelligence from the Institute of Philosophy at the University of Warsaw, but also you have a habilitation or a higher doctorate in social science management at the Leon Koźmiński Academy, where you are currently Vice Rector, Associate Professor at the Department of Management in Digital and Network Societies. And also you are one of the leaders of the AI Management Program. So I would like really to ask you to tell us more about how these relationships between human and robots are shaped. Also, given that you have been in the Center for Collective Intelligence at MIT in Boston till recently, and also you graduated from the New School of Social Research in New York. So, with all this background, I think you are the perfect person to give us to give us another. Optic and another view at this subject. So without further ado, I'm letting you tell us a few things.
Thank you so much. So hopefully everyone can hear and see me well. Thank you for inviting me indeed to this very interesting discussion and a very interesting conversation. I would like to shed some light on the work we've been doing, but indeed I have to say at the very beginning that this has been, for me, a great pleasure to watch this amazing movie, a beautifully picturesque movie, which is also a bit like a balm or like a massage in these tough times of the pandemics, also politically extremely turbulent times for Poland, for Polish women. So it was a very important thing for me to kind of watch something that presents a very, indeed, positive, although somewhat nostalgic view of the future. So I wanted to kind of put some context, perhaps, on what we're doing and how that is linked to Yves' beautiful work. And I'm going to share a presentation with you, and that hopefully works. So the question that I have asked myself several times when it comes to human-machine relations is, what is scary to humans, or what scares humans? And indeed, I have to tell you that we've been pondering on that question quite a lot in our work. When you think about various types of humanoid machines, machines that use natural language, machines that generate text, machines that are capable of hearing humans and interpreting what they have said, all types of robots that have any type of interaction, front-end interaction with humans, you have that question of how is the human going to respond to that? Is the human going to be happy with that? Is the human going to feel comfortable in our interaction? You usually don't ask that question about the machine, although there is a certain interesting feedback loop also happening out there. But indeed, the question of what is scary, I think, is very, very relevant here. And I don't think we have any obvious answers. Perhaps some of you know that in the field of human-machine interaction, we have this very interesting hypothesis that has been out there for quite a while already. I think something like 3 decades. It's called the uncanny valley, and it's all about certain reactions to different types of machines that have different levels of proximity to human-like appearance and human-like behavior. So you can see that on one axis you have familiarity here, and on the other you have human likeness, right? And indeed, a cell phone here, according to this, intersection of axes, is nothing that is harmful. It also doesn't really create or evoke any affective responses on the human side. When you think about a stuffed animal or a small humanoid robot like Nao, actually you can think of pretty positive responses because the system is not harming you. It doesn't look human-like, but it presents certain kind of cute human-like behaviors, and that's okay. It also has let's say, a certain posture that resembles a human posture. You have legs, you have hands, you have the head. But then something very weird happens, according to Mori's hypothesis, which is the uncanny valley, when the robot looks too much like a human, when it's too realistic, it creates a sensation that a zombie could create or a dead corpse. And that's indeed something that in terms of a human-machine design, very often people were trying to avoid. But I think the uncanny valley is really quite a complex phenomenon, right? And even though it's been confirmed in various studies throughout our scientific discoveries, it is true that it's not a simple phenomenon. You can say there is a sensation of eeriness to it, but there is also a sensation of curiosity to it. And there is also a very important factor of context that matters quite a lot. And I'm going to elaborate on that perhaps a bit later during this presentation. So I guess when you see something like this, pretty simple robot, that is kind of on purpose designed to be somewhat cute, you're going to be fine. But when you think about possible circumstances that you don't expect this robot to kind of be within, then you might think that this is not such a nice thing, and perhaps it's a bit hostile even, right? So when it's in the middle of the night and this thing kind of doesn't really listen to you, is not responsive, looks at you, and the eyes are red, you might think that the same robot that looks cute to you is actually, in a way, somewhat scary. When you think about Alexa, right, so Amazon's system, a smart speaker that is, I think, very well designed to be very easily classified just as a technology, so something that is not aspiring to be human-like, something that makes you feel at ease. On the other hand, you can say, okay, but sometimes this system can kind of respond or say something without being called out, and sometimes the system can also, for instance, generate responses that can make you feel uncomfortable, or, for instance, speak with a certain shallow voice, right? So that shallowness of the voice, lack of certain emotions that you would expect in the conversation, make you feel, or could make you feel, someone not at ease. And I think this is another interesting context, right, for this whole thing. Usually when we talk about the uncanny valley and what is really scary, we are thinking about a system like Sophia. But then when you look at Sophia the robot, on one hand you can say, yes, there's clearly something weird about the gestures, there's something weird about the silicone skin, and there is something very weird about the mimics. On the other hand, you can say there's something extremely humane, and we're curious about this system. That's why it travels the world. And also, David Hansen, who is the creator of Robot, recently said to me that for him, the uncanny valley is mostly about curiosity and certain journey towards a design that we're aspiring to create in the future, not the design that we currently have with all its shortages. And I think this is also kind of interesting. And we've been dwelling on this concept of the uncanny valley for quite a while, and we've created some virtual systems, bots, in fact, so not physical robots, but bots, like the one that you see on the screen. It's actually a system that was created for my university, which is Kosminski University, in 2 different versions. One version was just a text-based chatbot that could talk to you as an employee of the dean's office, and the other version was a virtual assistant that also had, as you can see, a certain appearance, so it could perform gestures, also proxemic gestures, so it could lean forward, backwards. It could also use voice to speak to you, and it could try to establish eye contact with you, so reciprocate your gaze. And indeed, that system was much more robust in terms of interaction. So we could expect that this multi-channel communication could perhaps be something that would trigger people more. What we did in this study is we were trying to compare 2 groups of people. One was interacting only with the text-based chatbot. The other one was interacting with the one that had the voice, the gaze, and the face. And apart from that, also had a text-based version. So one was way more robust, whereas the other one was quite simple. And we wanted to see what are the effective responses of people. Well, in order to find out what these responses are, very often we ask people. But in this study, we've decided to hook some electrodes on them to actually create and measure, measure their effective physiological responses to these systems, and to actually see which one is much more engaging and which one is less engaging. We had a working hypothesis here. We were assuming that much more engaging would be the assistant that does have that face and the gaze and all that. So the one that you see here with the picture. Our research actually proved that point, but also proved something else. So here you see some readings. These are quite interesting. This is electrodermal activity from the finger. The red line indicates the text-based chatbot, whereas the blue one indicates the chatbot that had the multi-channel communication options and also the face. And you can see that indeed the one that had the face and the gaze was much more engaging to the people. And that got confirmed across all channels. So here you can see the heart rate, and here you can see electromyography readings, so the readings from the facial muscles, zygomaticus and corrugator, which are responsible for, let's say, for frowning and for smiling also. And you can see, right, you can register those frowning and smiling responses quite well because it's a very clear reading and it's not as misguiding as, for instance, sometimes EEG is. So across all these channels, you could see that indeed people felt much more kind of engaged in an interaction with a chatbot that was more human-like. However, what we've also noticed was that people were trusting that system much less, right? So they usually had much shorter conversations with it. They usually were less inclined to, for instance, tell it a secret. And they found it also a bit more stupid and less professional. And for me, that's kind of very interesting, not only in the context of the uncanny valley, where you can say, all right, so here what we see is that a system that is more human-like is going to cause more uncanny valley. But on the other hand, there's a certain juncture here, or let's say a certain weird disproportion between the fact that people are generally less inclined to talk to this system, but also, on the other hand, much more triggered by it, right? So here you can reveal a certain complexity of this uncanny valley again. And to me, that's something to kind of work on and perhaps dwell on much more in the future, especially when we have more realistic systems, systems that will look much more human-like, where that simulation is going to become, let's say, a bit more perfect than the one that we know today. On the other hand, we also have done one more research that I think is a bit different, And this research was not focused on this negative side of collaboration or the way we interact with machines, so the interaction between humans and machines. It was more focused on how we work together, or whether we can work together and create synergetic effects. And we called it cobots. Cobots are collaborative robots, so robots that collaborate with humans. And what we were trying to investigate with Leon Ciechanowski, with Konrad Sowa, who are my great co-researchers here in this particular project, was, first of all, general attitudes towards artificial intelligence in the world of work in the future. That was just the first part. And in that first part, we were asking people some questions about, whether they were afraid that AI would take over their jobs. It turned out that mostly elderly generations are afraid of it, whereas the younger generations are either less afraid of it, or they have other concerns related to the world of labor or work, but not necessarily related to machines. Then we've asked another question: would you prefer your chatbot or virtual assistant of any kind to be more or less human-like? And here it turned out that the younger you are, the more okay you are with the fact that a humanoid system will be created and will work with you in the future. So that kind of made us think quite a lot, that people are okay with that human likeness, and that they have certain capacities or abilities to really work with it, even though sometimes it can be a bit inconvenient to feel. And that for us was quite an interesting discovery here. And so what we did later on is we've asked 6 managers that were working mainly in marketing departments to kind of share with us the ideas that they had about an assistant that they could work with, right? And we have asked them to tell us what kind of relationship they would like to have with that assistant, what would be the level of human resemblance, or on what platforms should it operate. And it turned out that they all had very different ideas, right? So there is nothing generic about artificial intelligence when you think about human-machine interaction. It's actually very personal, and people have different ideas about what assistants they would see themselves working with in the future. And that was very, very interesting for us, how different people thought of it and what types of systems they really desired, right? And the fact that there was no clear balance towards a certain solution was also quite a discovery here. So the third part of that experiment was working with the assistant. So we've created quite a few versions of that assistant for those people, those that they kind of really wanted. And also we made them feel very proactive about building this solution. We were really trying to kind of meet their needs in this experiment. And then we have asked them to really indeed work with that assistant in that third research part. So we did this experiment, which was in fact a simulation of a business problem that they usually face in their work. So they would have to resolve certain tasks that was all about designing, drafting, and advertising campaign for a client. And we have also asked them to tell us, where exactly would you like artificial intelligence to work with you? And some said, I would like AI to work with me on budgeting. Whereas some others said, I would like artificial intelligence to work with me on calling the clients, or setting the goals for the advertisement, or, for instance, for tracking what the other companies are doing, right? And doing some market research. So it turned out that people had not only different designs and ideas about relations, but also very different needs in their work environment. And what it turned out in this study, where we divided our respondents into 2 groups, one was working on their own, and the other one was working with the assistants that they wanted and that they have co-created, was that the group that worked with the assistant was 40% more productive, but also 40% happier and more satisfied with the solution of their work, so with the completed task. And I found that very interesting, that when you allow people to kind of really co-design something, they will feel more confident to use it, and they will be happier with the results. So I don't think there are any clear answers about, how people generally feel about technologies. Whether they're more or less human-like, it's just the context that really matters, and a certain sensation of agency on their side. That might be the answer. And also, I don't think that we actually see or navigate well in that space. We have systems that are going to be super cute, like the Paro seal that has been used for Alzheimer therapy, also particularly in Japan, but also in the US to treat soldiers with PTSD. And that has become an extremely successful project. And you can see assistants like this one. This is Jibo, a house assistant, that to me looks a bit like HAL 9000 and still is perceived as something extremely cute by children, right? So this is a very, very complex space. And to just add one more thing to it that I think could also really make us think is that, currently artificial intelligence is really booming, but it's booming in many different directions. And one of the directions is merging artificial intelligence with synthetic biology. And we have seen that just before the pandemics. So just before the pandemics, something like this was presented to us. It's called a xenobot. And these are different xenobots, which are in fact amalgamates of skin and heart stem cells of an African frog that are designed by artificial intelligence. So this, in fact, is a project in artificial life, right? And how to think about a design of something like this, I wonder, right? So to me, that's quite interesting. Is that gross to us? This is like a living cell, right? So are we engrossed by ourselves also? I mean, are we engrossed by something that is biological? And if so, then why? Are we engrossed because it's something that was created by artificial intelligence? Or is it just our physiological responses to anything of that kind, right? And I think taking into account that in the future we will see more of that, our ideas about how to design technologies that do something with us or for us is also going to be extremely challenged. And with that, I would like to conclude. And Anya, the floor is yours again, and also happy to discuss, exchange, and answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ola, for this great and very insightful presentation. And we have a few questions from the audience coming in, so I think it would be great to respond to them. So I think it's very interesting what you have been telling at the end about how biology and technology are intertwined. And I think it's more and more important in the context of aging societies, which is also the subject somewhat of Yves' film. And we have a question coming in from Margot Schulz about the fact that AI will eliminate more jobs, and what's the purpose? So my personal reaction is that there is a lot of jobs that are not even visible for the capitalist economy. And these are the jobs who are done by people who are not part of the system, primarily women, for instance, and caretaking jobs are not really something which is even seen as a job in many cases. So I think I would really like to take this question of Margot about eliminating jobs, but also in the context of aging societies and about the potential of how this enhancement of biology through technology could work. So would any one of you, Ola or Yves, would like to comment on this?
I mean, I'm happy to start, and I guess, this is just going to be one approach. Because frankly speaking, I just think that, whereas I do believe that there will be a lot of reskilling going on in the coming years, in the coming decade and decades even, I don't really believe in a jobless future for humans. Actually, most of the reports that we read are tending to indicate that we will work even more than we do. It's just that our work will be assisted by technologies, and because of that, those technologies will just transform the way we work, and we will have probably many new professions and many intermediary professions somewhere at the intersection of human and technology. And I do believe that there is something like the structural technological unemployment that kind of assists us, since the late 19th century. And indeed, there is a constant transformation of the market. But really, taking into account what AI can do, and it's still a very narrowly specialized tool for doing certain things, I would not think of it as something that takes away your job. Because when you think about your job, it's many different things that you usually do. And it requires a very holistic intelligence. And many aspects of your intelligence are triggered by the job you do. Your job usually consists of many different tasks. And some of these tasks can be performed by AI, which can do them for you, right? And in some domains, maybe there will be more of such tasks. And in some domains, there will be less of such tasks. But it's very hard, really, for me to figure out how AI could really take over that plethora of things that you're doing when you are working. And because of that, I think I have a bit of a problem with such books like The Rise of Robots, that is essentially all about scaring people that, their jobless future is coming and that they're going to become unnecessary, because it's just factually not true, right? You have to be honest with people and tell them that there are going to be many transformations on the market and that there will be marginalized groups, and this is something that needs to be addressed. But you cannot tell people, either if you believe that this is going to be a marvelous thing, that they will not have to work, or if you believe that it's going to be a disaster that they will not work, but you cannot tell them that this is something that's going to happen in the next decades, because it's actually to the contrary. Most of us will be working quite hard. A lot of our work will be assisted by technology, but there is no evidence stating that AI can really take away any types of jobs in, complexities of what they are. Even when it comes to physical jobs, like majority of physical jobs consist of many, many very, granular tasks. And to create a robot that could do that, on humans' behalf, actually is a very costly endeavor that nobody wants to take. So to me, very pragmatically and realistically, I just disagree with the vision of a jobless future. I hope it's a good news, but yeah, I know people have many different views on that.
I agree 100% with Alexandra. Yeah. I agree 100% with Alexandra. On my small side, I have a very small experience about using technology like robotics, and the conclusion about the work I did was that this robot, this technology can work, but with two more jobs behind, and a new job. Because it's not just doing a workshop; it's doing some. It could be a new job for I don't know, for an artist or for somebody very interested about the technology, digital. Robotic and well. So it's I agree totally. And second thing, and I like to have the feeling about Alexandra about that. I think that the small robots I chose these small robots because in the pitch of the story was that this robot get 2 legs, 2 arms, and I don't think it's definitely the future of humanoid robots because the legs, it's too complicated to develop and it's not rentable for investment. And so I agree totally in your way, and I think the evolution will be with humans, and humans will be adapted with all this technology, and it will divide a lot of sectors and a lot of jobs and a lot of things for sure, And it's very strange because when I end this movie, the first critics I had was your robot will replace the ladies of the workshops, and I said no, it's impossible. You need more people to make the robot working, and so it's well, that's the case.
But I think also, when we're talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning, most of the time we imagine this thing from sci-fi movies, whereas in reality, AI, of course, it's powerful algorithms with a lot of computing power and using a lot of energy and so on and so forth. But basically, the task that AI can perform, of course, sometimes they are impressive, like GPT-3, but it's not human intelligence. And I think one of the why your robots are so powerful because they are human powered and not artificially powered, right? So I think this film gives a lot of insights, and we have another comment from another viewer, Agata Tarasiewicz, who was saying that she's very curious about the film and this relation between the human and the robot, how it is set up, and how it develops. And she was thinking of this quote from the book Le Petit Prince, which I'm sure you know, given that you're French. And the quote goes, "To tame means to create bonds. And create bonds, of course, say the fox. Now you are just a little boy, to me, like 100,000 little boys." And I think we have to end in a few minutes, but I think it would be great also to have this one last thought from Alexandra about anthropomorphizing technology. I think there's a lot of issues with this, and there's an ongoing debate about whether it's okay to anthropomorphize technology or not, whether when we're talking to an Alexa device, we are forgetting that it's actually Amazon just processing our data, or so I think we could just finish this conversation. I see there's more questions coming in, but actually we have to finish in a few minutes. So if you could tell us a bit more about this, how do you feel about this? Is it okay that people have emotions towards technology, or is it something that we should be fighting against?
No, I think it's only human, really, and it's beautiful that we are trying to find connection somehow, right, with a system that is built in a completely different way on silicone and is basically, well, dead. I don't know if we have any other better point of reference than ourselves in technology building. Obviously, we can look into biology and all the other organisms, right? We can have all the post-human component of technology design, which is also very interesting. But I guess we are our own first reference, and that's how we build our technologies. And they also trigger our expectations because of how they're built, and that creates a certain loop. And I am not particularly judgmental about this loop. I would be kind of, in terms of like certain ethical questions, I would be more, inclined to really think critically about the future of artificial life, right? And creating systems that are not only like reading our signals and finding the best possible response, but are actually feeling something on their own, right? And we don't know whether that's doable with the current technological ecosystems and perhaps new methodologies, whether we can create systems that have any sorts of sensations or qualia, right? So subjective feelings about the world. It seems like something that can perhaps be achieved in, hundreds of years. But indeed, in that very last example of mine, in this, in those systems that are actually not only biology inspired, but created on protein, you are perhaps building something that is going to feel. And that creates a plethora of questions to me, right? On how such machines would reflect on other organisms, right? And, to what extent we can build them. We're allowed to build them. And for me, that's like taking into account this example, something that already exists, and it's not sci-fi. This is a super relevant question for a short-term future.
Thank you for this comment. Would you like to have a last comment? Or should I just invite everybody to go and rush and watch your film?
Well, no, I think Alexandra did very well. Congratulations for your presentation. I love it. It's very interesting and very impressive with the last part. It's make me dreaming about. No, it's fine for me. It's fine. I think the thing is, for me, it's to have a look on the movie will be great already. It's a great chance to. For me,
you did an amazing job. I just want to say that this movie is so moving. It's like we have so much dystopia going on about technology, and the discourse around technology is so negative in popular culture. And you've created such a sensitive picture, and I totally appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I would like to invite everyone, and I want to thank you, both of you, for sharing with us tonight. And I would like to thank also all the crew in Pinup Studio in Warsaw, to whom I'm saying hi, for making this happen and producing this for us. And I would like to invite everyone who's in Poland. Unfortunately, the film is available only to viewers with Polish IP addresses. To go to Ninateka, to our viewing platform, where the film The Year of the Robot will be available online for the next 48 hours, starting from 9 p.m. 5 minutes ago, till October 24th, till 8:59 p.m. CEST. Or actually CET, maybe even. No, it's a Saturday. Sorry, we're changing time at the end of the week. So thanks so much. Thanks so much for all the questions. We didn't have the time to ask all of them, but thanks so much for contributing to everyone. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at the next Digital Cultures Festival sessions.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. And enjoy the movie. Okay, bye.